Hi, in this video I wanted to talk about terms and conditions. Being very clear about what your terms and conditions are as a service provider, as a voiceover artist, is very, very important. And it's a kind of thing that we quite often overlook because we want to make the transaction with any potential collaborators as frictionless as possible. We want people to come out and say, please, we need your wonderful voice. And we go, yes, of course. How much? Wonderful. I'm glad that we could so very quickly, instantaneously agree such a marvelous industry standard fee. Let's go get it and then celebrate the wonderful results. And quite often that happens, obviously on a daily basis that happens for me, but sometimes it's very, very important to have terms and conditions so you've got stuff to explain the process in case there are any kinks or any misunderstandings. So what I have is that I have a rates page on my website which is unlisted. I have it unlisted on my website because I understand that for a lot of people who are looking for voiceover artists and work, the whole pricing of voiceover is so complex and nuanced because it depends on so many other factors that it can scare a lot of people away. If you say, my basic studio fee is £250, then for someone who is looking for 5 very short phone prompts for their business, for their startup, and it's just them, may go, £250 is not a minimum that I can do for this. I will go elsewhere. And yes, you could then go, yes, but there's actually nuance to this and it depends on the work that the area of work and where it's being used, etc., 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 etc. They've already left, they've already gone on to Fiverr or wherever else that they may get something more at their budget. So that's the whole reason, first and foremost, why I personally don't put my fees up. But I always link to Gravy for the Brain, or there's the Global Voice Academy one as well. And I can I state there in my rates page that my basic studio fee is £250. But with this rates page, it also includes my terms and conditions. And what I always make sure that I do is that I again introduce very lightly in any conversation that I have, any email dialogue that I have with a client, is that when we've agreed to move forward with a project, is that I send a quick link to my rates and terms and conditions page just for your reference, so you know what is included in the price and what isn't included in the price, and also in terms of like payment situations and all of this kind of thing. And this is important because it gives you some form of backing should there be any issues further down the line. Now, the most important thing about terms and conditions is clarity. It just makes it incredibly clear exactly what is included in your general fee, in your basic studio fee. So, the recording equipment, the quality of the recording, what is already included in all of that. Maybe some base terms of usage is included in that as well. So that they have an idea about, these are all, where is this figure of £250 or £300 or £150 or £500, where is it derived from? So if I say it's for the electricity, and it's also for my microphone, and it's also for this hour of my time, and it's also for this and this and this, then they have a clear idea of exactly how they've arrived at the fee. Again, this goes back to what I was saying previously in terms of like invoices, itemizing your usage and all of the separate elements that you're pricing for, so that you have so you can give clients a greater understanding of what it is exactly that they're paying. Yes, they've got a nice round figure at the end of it, but you itemize it so that in the future, if they come back to you again, that you've got something as a reference point for how you came towards these things. But also it's important in these terms and conditions to include exactly what your payment terms are. Now, I obviously include, my payment terms are within 30 days of invoicing. I also know that for a lot of the clients that I work with, it's more like 60 days because they have several different rungs of administration to go through, or they work on a quarterly basis. So There are always going to be exceptions to those, but I make it clear that these are my payment terms and these are the ways that I can be paid. Yes, I can take a BACS transfer, a bank transfer, direct bank transfer. Yes, I can take a PayPal transfer. Yes, I can go through Stripe if you're in certain territories. Yes, I can use TransferWise if you want to use this kind of thing. And also if there are certain areas that I don't want to use, then I make that explicit as well, because you don't want to go all the way through an entire process and then have the client turn around and go like, okay, so we're just going to PayPal you this now, and then for whatever reason you may go like, I don't use PayPal, or I don't want to use PayPal for various reasons or whatever. So first of all, it eliminates that level of risk. There's another area which you can clarify with your terms and conditions, which is really to do, or it's a crucial one really, is what the process should be for late payments as well. And I have have it written down that if payment isn't by a certain point, then I would re-invoice with a penalty fee on top of that until the invoice is settled. Now, in actuality, in the 5 years that I've been a full-time voiceover, I have actioned that twice in my entire career. Because most of the time you check it, most of the time I give people, I ask for 30 days. More often than not, I get 30 days, but I don't really start worrying until about 60 days because I'm sensitive to there are various other different workings for certain organizations. And if we get beyond that thing, that's when I will have auto reminders and I will ascertain what's kind of like going on. But I think it's important to at least have this in some form of print so that people can engage with it and are aware of it, rather than you suddenly arbitrarily re-invoicing someone with this penalty fee that you haven't referenced or linked to or alluded to existing as part of your pricing structure at all in the first place. You need to give people a heads up. Even if they choose not to click on that link and do their due diligence, well, then that's on them to a certain degree. But you can only be in a process to charge, or say, look, I would charge this normally, but if this invoice could be settled as soon as possible, that would be great, and I won't charge. That's a totally fine and legitimate conversation to have, but only if you've flagged up in advance of it all that is part of your pricing structure, that you do, offer a late payment situation, or, you might escalate it and go to a small claims court if you're based in the UK or anything else like that. I mean, it would depend on the size of the project, and thankfully I've never had to deal with that kind of situation. But, again, unless you've got it in some form of writing, then how are they to know that would be part of it? And the other reason why that this is very, very important is to clarify what the pickup and revisions policy is. And I've got separate revisions and pickup policy depending on whether or not it's self-directed and whether or not it's a directed session. If it's a directed session, then by the end of whatever the amount of time is, the client should have everything that they need. And if they don't, if the session has to extend on beyond a certain time, then again, you should say in writing what that pricing should be, rather than having an hour and a half or a 3-hour session going on and then you're like, oh, well, this is an extra half an hour. That should be billed normally as a provider, but only, again, if you've said in your payment terms and conditions that after this point in time, maybe this amount is discretionary and this amount isn't discretionary, and this is what my rate is if we exceed that amount. You should make these things explicit and clear. Even if you then, as part of your customer service and your understanding as an individual, as a humanitarian, you decide to then offer a discount on that or waive that fee that one time. That's completely up to you, and that's a call to make. But being very clear about what your terms and conditions should be and making that explicit by putting them in writing on your website somewhere and linking to that is good practice, generally speaking. Similarly, with self-directed sessions, it's the same thing in terms of there needs to be a time limit in terms of if you're, how many takes do you want? How is the process going to be? What pickups and what's the reason for? If it's because they haven't provided pronunciations that you couldn't find anywhere else and you requested them and they didn't have them, or you requested them and they just gave you the wrong ones, then that's not got anything to do with you. Or if they request a complete re-record in a completely different style after the, way after the event, then again, that's something that you should be charging for. So in terms of knowing your worth and all of this kind of thing, again, you need to have, wording very specifically to cover all of these eventualities, which you can then choose to, duck and dive with if you so desire, depending on the project and depending on the client. But again, having it set out, I think, is important. Now, I'm not purporting that any of this is a contract. It's not a contract. You're not getting anyone to sign, or you're not creating a document where you're asking the client that you agree to all of these terms, conditions, and you must docu-sign here in order to work with me. Please press submit, and trying to get them to create a legal document, I think is problematic for a whole number of reasons. The main one being is that you're creating a lot of friction in the process of working with you. So there may be those people, and good on them if they can, that can negotiate to that kind of standard. But generally, as freelance providers, certainly with the people that I'm working with, that simply wouldn't be practical for a whole number of reasons. But in terms of the terms and conditions, in terms of anything that I'm going to flag up subsequent to a recording session or any issues down the way, I need to have a document where I go, this is what I do and this is how I do it and this is how I price things. And we've gone outside of that. We have diverged from that in some way, shape or form, and we need to address this as a result at the back end. You need to have that documentation somewhere, and you can just then link to it very lightly, but it covers all of the eventualities. So that people are very, very aware and conscious about how you process it. Because the most difficult thing, especially when you're starting out, is that you record a project and then 3 weeks later or a month later or 5 months later, someone gets back to you and says, oh, there's this pickup here and this pickup here and this thing here. And they don't talk about an extra fee. And then you're caught in the middle between wanting to please the client and not creating any kind of bad blood, and it wasn't in your mind that this was ever going to be an eventuality when you originally said yes to the project, but because you haven't made it explicitly clear about what your terms and conditions are, you feel bad, or you feel awkward about going, actually it's going to be a whole other fee again, because then the client could rightly go, well, that wasn't flagged up, how would I be aware of this kind of thing? So yes, just be aware and try and create something that you can link to lightly and share in order to be able to back you in those kind of situations, because it's very important if you want to actually operate as a business. I hope this video has been of some use to you. Please do like, subscribe, and share the word. If you spread the word if you found it at all useful. If you have any other experiences of using terms and conditions that differ from what I've covered now that you found particularly useful to apply, or any other scenarios that you have questions about, then please do say in the comments below and I would address them as soon as I can. And thank you so much as ever for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.